Okay, welcome. This is our the OGWRP meeting to bring everybody up to speed on where we're at in various aspects of getting government funding to the OGWRP program. We've got a packed agenda today, so we'll try and stay on track as much as possible. But your input and questions are going to be important to this process as we move through it. This is your meeting to get your questions answered and to present you with the latest information that we have on these various programs that we can try and make available to you as we implement various stages of the OGWRP program. My name is Harold Cross. I'm with the Grant County Conservation District. Many of you I've met with already, and many have seen me on various meetings. So I look forward to meeting you in person. It's kind of great to get everybody out. So we have these face-to-face meetings. So just as an introduction here, as we move through the next part. Okay, purpose of the meeting today. Number one is, like I said, is to provide an update on the status and timelines of OGWRP. We understand that our primary mission as conservation agencies and state government agencies is to get you off of groundwater and onto Columbia River water through the East Columbia Basin Irrigation District. So timelines are extremely important. And those are probably the most frequent questions that I get asked. When will the money be available for different parts and phases of this program? Some of those are not answerable because they're out of our area for decision making, especially as we get above the state level and get to the federal level. But we'll bring you up to speed on as much as we know to date on that aspect of it. We also intend to help you understand more about the USDA NRCS programs that we're pursuing through OGWRP, and these are specifically the PL 566 Small Watershed Program, the Rural Conservation Partnership Program, RCPP, and the program that maybe most of you are most familiar with is the Environmental Quality Incentive Program. Each one of these programs has applicability to the implementation of all aspects of this program. What I mean is from the pumping stations at the canal all the way out to your farms and your pivot systems. So each one of these programs plays a specific role in each one of those aspects of this program. We want to bring you up to speed and share what the OGWRP partner roles are in delivering these programs and how best to engage with them. For those of you who have never been involved in any of these government programs, some of this is going to be foreign to you. But it's our responsibility to bring you up to speed and educate you on your role in accessing these programs and how to access, so what these programs will bring to you and when to sign up for these programs and prepare for that. So a lot of the effort we put in so far is to meet with you on your farms and actually prepare you and get all the information together that you will need. And the last part of this, and probably just as important as any, is to help get your questions answered. What I've heard consistently since the Conservation District's been involved in this is that there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of different things going on out there because people just don't understand and really haven't sat in a room like this and had their questions answered. So you all collectively hear the same thing at the same time. We may not be able to answer all your questions, but if you have questions we can't, we'll seek out those answers for you and provide those to you as we get those. So consistent messaging is critical to this process, that you fully understand what these things can do for you and how to access those. Over the last year, that the Conservation District's been engaged, these are the things that have happened. OGWRP Funding Steering Committee. Every 2 weeks, a committee's been meeting as long as we've been involved to familiarize ourselves with the program, bring your questions through these committees up to us, and looking at ways of engaging the state government and getting some of the funding through the state sources, and for sure to start looking towards accessing these federal programs USDA programs through Natural Resource Conservation Service. We've submitted an NRCS Regional Conservation Partnership Program proposal last year. That was not successful for several reasons that we've basically taken care of those problems now as we've gotten additional funding in. So we'll be submitting another application this year. So we learned a great deal about the RCPP program this last year. We'll be fully prepared to begin applying for a new application later this winter, which hopefully will be approved by next spring. We've received $400,000 from Washington State Legislature. Much to the people sitting at this desk right here have helped make that possible. That $400,000 is coming through the Conservation District to help do the things we're doing here today. Get information out to you folks, provide some technical resources to you as I work with you on your farms, basically information transfer. And when we're approved for a 566 project, work very closely with NRCS, helping them build the watershed plan and take us all the way up to implementation. So that infusion of money makes all this happen, and we're most thankful to the legislature for making that happen. Whoop. East Columbia Basin Irrigation District submitted a formal request to NRCS to initiate the watershed planning process as the sponsor. Without that happening and have a local sponsor, we would not be able to access the 566 money. So as of now, the East Columbia Basin Irrigation District is the sponsor. That formal application went up to Roy Lean at the state office, which initiated the next phase of the process, which is developing the preliminary investigative feasibility report, which as of this morning, when I talked to the contractor that's developing that, we're in the final edit stages of that, anticipating that that will be run by the East Columbia Basin Irrigation District Board of Directors next week at their Tuesday meeting, and hopefully get that approved so we can put that formal application up to Roy Lean for submission to Washington, D.C., which would be the step. So we've completed everything at the state level at that point, and it'll be the hands of the national level to take it from there and get that back to us. And we're hopeful that that could happen later in the winter. You know, again, back to that timeline thing. We're not sure exactly, but we're hopeful that that would happen sometime this winter to make that the next step. So we've engaged with the Willamette Partnership, Nicole, who is standing in the back of the room back there. They've been helping with us with information, education, and outreach. They'll also be an integral part of preparing the next RCPP application. They have a lot of background in doing this type of work throughout the Northwest, so they're a great partner for us. We've engaged with the Farmers Conservation Alliance, who's out in Oregon as well. They're writing the PIFR for us. We've been working closely with Larry Johnson here and his staff and in Spokane to get that feasibility report completed. In my conversations with them this morning, like I said earlier, that is done for all intents and purposes in preparation for the meeting next week. The Farmers Conservation Alliance is working across 4 states on projects like this. They have a large and huge background and portfolio in doing this type of work, not only the PIFRs, but actual watershed planning itself. So they're a great technical partner for us and have been kind of instrumental in getting us as far as we have. As far as the PIFR goes, the Conservation District was able to go out and get non-government money into the process to fund that PIFR and basically get ahead of the game on that process. So the Conservation District is funding the PIFR. So I've been working with producers on the laterals. I've worked with a lot of the producers on the 79-2. I'm working with people on the 22-1. And this is important because in preparation for our RCPP application, the more we know about what your on-farm hookup needs are, the better we're going to be prepared to get that RCPP application in. And the other part of that, in a meeting I had with the 22-1 that I sat in last week, is The power part of this is huge. We need to get a pretty good understanding of what the load is going to be, the power load into these systems. So and what I mean by that is, what is the net plus or minus on the power side? As we take your wells offline, and what the power needs were of getting that water 1,000 feet out of the ground up to your farm versus what the new power requirements are going to be. As you put booster pumps on, the difference between that will be the new load, the new electrical load. The PUD needs this data in order to reconfigure their substations and make the power available to you. So I'll be continuing to work with you on that as we move through the process. We've developed a website and a newsletter, and this is our site. This is your newsletter, and this is your website. This is specific for you to get your questions answered. This is specific to you to get you the most current, up-to-date information. We will keep this current at all times. I would encourage you to get this on your computers and log into this site as often as not, at least weekly, so you'll get the most current updates on what's going on in the OGWRP. All the other agencies that are involved will also be linked to this site. So it'll be an interactive program where you can submit questions to us. We'll get the answers back to you in short order and get you up to speed on the latest and greatest of what's going on within the OGWRP. So it's a collaborative effort, and it takes a lot of people to make this happen. It's very complex with a lot of moving parts. But first and foremost is our legislators. They're the ones that go to the legislature and basically build a case for bringing state money into the program. And so far, they've been very successful, and we've seen that happen through the last legislative cycle. These monies can be used to advance the construction of these individual projects, act as match money for some of our federal programs, and so this is integral to the success of this project. So I'd like to introduce you right now and bring up the legislators and have them just give you a brief update on where they're at and where we're going with it from the legislative standpoint. So we'll get them up, and that's Senator Judy Warnick, Senator Mark Schoesler, Representative Mary Dye, and Representative Tom Dent. So welcome them this morning.
Thank you, Harold. So I'm Senator Judy Warnick. I represent the 13th Legislative District. So Lincoln County, a lot of Grant County, Kittitas County, and a slice of Yakima County. So very dependent on our irrigation systems. And I want to welcome you here to learn more about what's happening with the Columbia Basin Project. If nothing else, you look at that list of timelines and list of priorities that Harold just put up. Acronyms, you have to learn the acronyms. What does RCPP mean? What does NRCS mean? It's been a steep learning curve for me, but I just want to welcome you here and help educate everyone what's been going on, what's the future. We are on the edge of great things happening, I believe, with this project to finish it. So thank you for coming, and going to turn it over to who's next, Senator Schoesler. So thank you.
Well, again, I'm Mark Schoesler. I think I know most all of you in the room. And we have some incredible prospects through the work of Harold, Roylene, and others to leverage this thing to make it attainable. You know, at the end of the day, I think we have to remember two things. First of all, the project isn't finished. We all know that. But we cannot continue to let the aquifer go. And this isn't about just Ritzville or Schrag or someplace. This is about multiple counties, and that includes Lincoln County. You know, the project was supposed to get to Lincoln County. It has to get to Lincoln County because their aquifers are depleting every bit as fast as an aquifer in Schrag or Connell. We have to remember the entire project. And what we're really all about is getting the water there and protecting the aquifer, because if you're in Lynn and you don't have water to drink or flush the toilet, you don't really care how this gets done. You just want it done. So thank you.
This is a happy day for me. This group of legislators has been on a journey for 6 years. And it really started when Lynn, Washington lost their municipal water supply during the Combine Demolition Derby. And that's when we knew that things had to change and that we could build the political will to get funding to finish the second half of this project. And that's what the commitment that I made to myself and others, that we would do that. And this group of legislators has worked tirelessly since that day to get state funding in and use that state funding to leverage federal dollars. And that's where we're at today. So what you see in front of me is a map. And on that map, there has been multiple delegations to Washington, D.C. And every time we went, we had people sign that map. The most recent signature was the chief of NRCS, Terry Cosby. And we'll be going again to assure that the federal funding will be well received for this project because of the great importance that it has. The journey that we've been on is a journey that is a bigger vision and a bigger hope for this region, that we can get water into this watershed. And what you're going to hear today is a group of people from Oregon and Washington and DC as well that are going to facilitate federal funding, because it's an economic problem. It's basic economics that we look at our family budget, our farm budget, and know that there's no possible way that we can lift a project of this size. At the state level, with our first appropriation of $15 million, we realize that it's a drop in the bucket overall of what's needed. And 48 million later, we realize that even this project is too large for a state budget to sustain, but we certainly can share the resource. So it's bringing those buckets in like you do when you're doing a big project, when you're going to buy a new piece of equipment or when you're going to buy new land. You look at all your buckets that you have available, your savings, your resources at the bank, how you can service that debt, and what we can do to make it sustainable for the generations to come. And that's what we're doing. We're bringing in multiple buckets into each pipeline so that each group can interact with their district to customize what they need to develop this land. And really what it's about, it isn't about the people that's sitting here today, but it's about developing the land resource to the fullest potential without impacting the resources that the communities that are over the top of the aquifer depend upon. And it's to restore that so that we leave the region in better condition for the next generation than what we received it in this generation. So for me, this is a passion. We're at the moment where I believe we're going to break through and get some new water delivery in areas that we didn't think possible. And I think the hardest part about this project for the last 6 years is to convince the producers today who've waited for 50 years, who've grown old and tired fighting the fight, to realize that we can do it and that it can happen and that it is happening and that it will happen because we have the commitment to make it happen, and we're going to find the resources that we need to make it happen in a way that keeps our farms sustainable for generations, financially, and also to steward the resources properly for the next generation. So I really appreciate the opportunity to see all of you guys here, and thank you for coming.
Well, thank you. Good morning. My name is Tom Dent, and I represent the 13th Legislative District along with my seatmate who was in here earlier, Senator Warnick. And, I'm just going to talk a little bit about, and very short too, but I want to say that everybody in this room wants this project to happen. We want to finish this and we want to make it work. And there's a lot of passion to do that. And along the way, there's a lot of roadblocks. And we continually run into more roadblocks, and we need to solve issues. And, you know, we kind of go back to the whiskeys for drinking, waters for fighting thing, because that's what we run into a lot. But all the legislators that are here are committed and focused, and we want to do this. We are. And we got great teams here from Roylene here and from Harold and his crew over here, and many, many others that are focused to make this project a success. And we still have a few more bumps in the road. I get that. We know that, but we're working hard to solve those problems. And so what I'm asking of everybody is understand that we're trying to solve those problems, work with everybody and give everybody a chance to do that. And I think we're going to get there. I believe we're going to get there with success. And I want this project finished as badly, if not more than anybody. And I'm just one more thing is when I was 5 years old, I stood on the bank of the West Canal in Othello, by where the railroad station was. And I saw the water come into that canal for the first time. So I've been around a couple of days, much longer than Senator Schoesler. So I get it. And we're going to achieve our goal. Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for being here today, and thank you so much for the hard work you put in. Coming out of the government environment for many years until I retired, I was never involved in politics. In fact, we were basically steered away from politics, but I've grown a lot and learned a lot from these folks over the last year that I've been involved, and I can tell you that they work hard. You know, I've been in Sunday meetings, Saturday meetings, night meetings. They're behind this 100%, and thank you so much for that. Let's go up to the next one. Okay, the agencies, I'm going to go back here. Agencies are critical to this project, both at the state level and at the federal level. And so we're going to start with having the state agencies. The ones primarily that have been involved is Department of Ecology through the Office of the Columbia River have been involved with this all along. Of course, with the Department of Ecology, and then the other state agencies we've worked with, the Department of Ag and several others, but the other on the federal level is the Bureau of Reclamation has been very much involved with this project, along with the East Columbia Basin Irrigation District, working in tandem and hand on various aspects of this to make it happen. So right now we're going to start with Melissa Downs. She's a policy lead for OCR, Washington State Department of Agriculture. She's been working with you folks from the very beginning, particularly on the enlargement of the canal system and getting the water down to your farms. And so she's going to talk about where the project is from the Bureau of Reclamation standpoint right now. So I'm going to turn this over to Melissa right now and let her give a presentation. I'll give it a second here to turn that over.
All right, good morning. Can you all hear me?
I can.
Okay. Okay, good. And can you see my screen? Oops.
Yes, I can. But I don't know if anybody else can.
I'm checking with the room real quick by text so we can make sure that you're getting heard, Melissa. But yeah, why don't you get started and we'll double check and stop you if they can't hear you.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you all today on Odessa Groundwater Replacement. I'll be kind of providing the background and history lesson for the rest of the speakers in this little session here. I've been with Ecology for nearly 20 years.
Melissa, I'm sorry to interrupt. I want to let you know they're actually working to get your audio connected now. So I'm hearing that if you can pause for just a minute now, they're going to give us a thumbs up when folks in the room can hear you. No, it's okay. Sorry for the technical difficulties. This is a new world for all of us.
I'm glad some people can hear.
Yep.
It looks like everybody on Zoom can hear you just fine, and I'm just waiting for a thumbs up from our friend on camera, the OGWRP presenter lens there, to let us know when they can hear us in the room. Let us know wait, I guess they can't hear me either. Okay, I'll go back to texting.
Can you try it now, Melissa?
I can hear you, Christina. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yep. Let's try.
Great.
Keep talking.
All right. Well, thank you all for participating today and for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you all on Odessa Groundwater Replacement Program. I'll kind of be providing the background for the rest of the speakers in this little bit of session between Jennifer Hickenbottom and Jed Crowther as well. I'm Melissa Downs. I'm a licensed hydrogeologist with the state of Washington. I am currently the Financial and Project Section Manager for the Office of Columbia River, working on water supply development in Greater Eastern Washington. And while I'm based in Yakima, I do a lot of work and travel in the Columbia Basin. As Harold mentioned, I've been working on Odessa for many years. So I kind of got assigned to give the history lesson a bit this morning. There are a lot of pieces to the Odessa Groundwater Replacement Program puzzle. And as Senator Warnick mentioned, you need to kind of know the acronyms. So I'm going to be using that OGWRP terminology a fair bit here. How did OGWRP start? I think is the fundamental question that I want to try to answer in the next few minutes. Many of you are aware of this, but I didn't want to leave anyone behind. So I'm going to go back in time a bit and start from the beginning. Governor Locke started the Columbia River Initiative back in 2001, and it culminated in an MOU that was signed in December of 2004. The parties that signed that MOU were the governor, as I mentioned, and the Bureau of Reclamation and the 3 Columbia Basin irrigation districts. That MOU had a component of OGWRP, an Odessa groundwater replacement, and the Governor Gregoire followed suit with the Columbia River and Water Resource Management Act that passed in 2006, which got codified in RCW 9090. This was really a new way of approaching water supply development work at the time. Previously, water resource management was all about allocation and regulation amongst users, not looking forward into that water supply development realm. And I'd like to think that OCR has been successful since 2006. This legislature also provided a series of directives for our office to be working on. And first and foremost in that list of directives in RCW 9090 is groundwater replacement for ag users in the Odessa subarea. And we really approach our water supply development work with a problem-solving lens. We look at balancing allocation. So in this instance, we recognize there's impacts to other users, municipal and industrial, and the types of projects that we work on, whether it's surface storage or water conservation. OGWRP has a little bit of everything in solving this nut. So I'm going to do a little bit of background here. Again, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, and you all probably know better than I, that surface water is diverted at Grand Coulee Dam to service the Columbia Basin project to irrigate what is authorized as 1 million acres. And while the development of this federal irrigation project slowed in the 1960s and 70s, the state of Washington issued temporary groundwater permits as kind of a stopgap. And unfortunately, that process slowed to almost a halt as far as development. And here we are today with large amounts of water being pumped from the deep basalt wells that receive little recharge. And with these two maps, the green here represents largely the built out part of the Columbia Basin project. This yellow on the right-hand side is what is represented by the OGWRP lands that were studied in the Odessa subarea. So it really focuses on the white part of the left-hand map there of the acres that we're kind of targeting in this program. I want to dive also a little bit into why it's important we find alternatives to groundwater use in the Odessa subarea, and Senator Schoesler hit upon this a bit, that the aquifers in decline. This is what's referred to as a heat map. It demonstrates the decline levels within the Odessa subarea aquifer. And the darker the blue, the darker the decline. So the darkest blue represents, it's depicted as greater than 125 feet of decline, but some of those areas are also receiving up to 200 feet of decline. Again, this pumping started back in the 60s and we have little recharge. And when you fast forward to today, here in 2021, we've got these regional declines in the aquifer. In 2001, as I mentioned, that Columbia Basin Initiative started, and Ecology received a statutory directive to work on the Odessa Groundwater Program. In 2006, we started the Odessa Subarea Special Study, and this was a combined effort between Reclamation and the state of Washington. The special study really focused on the replacement of 102,000 acres out of 170,000 acres of Odessa groundwater irrigated lands. That 102,000 acres is the part that overlaps with the federal Columbia Basin project. And the driving force of the study was to avoid the economic loss and the natural resource damage of the declining aquifers. So those two things combined noted that there would be local and statewide impacts if this aquifer kind of failed to the point where folks can't get any water out. And then obviously there would be natural resource impacts, as I mentioned as well. So this special study culminated in September of 2012 with a record of decision, combined state and federal environmental review analysis. Part of that feasibility included designs on components related to large infrastructure. It had the environmental review and it had a biological opinion. And that record of decision identified a modified partial replacement process. But that study took almost 8 years, and you can see there was a lot of work that went into getting to that final decision. The themes in the modified partial replacement talk about maximizing existing infrastructure, which is why you see all the upgrades that were done to the East Low Canal. To increase the surface water delivery capacity to these new Odessa irrigated replacement lands. And it was also to provide water both north and south of I-90. Recall on that heat map with the declines, there were two large blobs. One was north of I-90 and one was south of I-90. It also allowed for some phased development going forward as well. And as Harold mentioned, none of this would be possible without the partnerships that have been developed since the 2001 Columbia River Initiative. I'm in need of updating this slide. I've used this slide in several presentations over the years, and we need to get Grant County Conservation District added to our kind of county participants as well. So again, here's just kind of a timeline or a summary of here we are 20-ish years later from the 2001 start of the Columbia River Initiative. The date I have on the slide is the date that MOU was signed, but the effort started a little earlier than that. And that we're really on the cusp of delivering significant amounts of Odessa groundwater replacement via the Columbia Basin project, and it's a very exciting place to be. This is my last slide here, just identifying some next steps. I think Jed's going to talk a little bit about where we've been as far as some of the construction aspects and getting into a little more detail on some of these next steps, which is much more focused on the design and construction of the individual pumping plants and delivery systems, which I know is going to be a larger focus of the workshop today. So with that, I think I'll hand it over to Jed.
Actually, can we hand it to, is it okay to hand it to Jennifer? Is that okay? Can you all hear me out there? If we could have Jennifer actually present, that would be great, just so we don't have to move our audio around too much. I apologize for the inconvenience here. Jennifer, are you ready?
Think so. Let's
Okay, fantastic. Good morning.
see. Morning. I'm trying to figure out how to share my screen.
Okay,
Oh, here we go.
got it? That'd be great. Thank you.
Can you see it?
Not quite yet. You may have just a little bit of a delay.
There it goes.
All right.
Perfect.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jennifer Hickenbottom. I have been working with Reclamation since 2015. I was hired specifically to be the project manager for the Odessa Groundwater Replacement Program. So I've met many of you, but not all of you. Let's start with. So Reclamation federal funding. I know this is one of the key components that people ask about regarding the FEIS. In the FEIS that was signed in 2012, yes, it did state that no federal funding of reclamation funding would be used for implementation. This is because the benefit cost ratio was less than 1. Regardless of that, since 2004, 2005, 2006, 2011, Reclamation has spent approximately $5.5 million. Those monies went to fund the PASS, which is a report, pre-plan formulation, appraisal reports, feasibility studies, the draft EIS, the final EIS, and the ROD. So the significant amount of money was spent to get us to this point of completing the FEIS. Then in 2018, after implementation had been going for a few years, Reclamation, with the help of ECBID, reevaluated the benefit cost ratio. This resulted in the benefit cost ratio equaling greater than 1. So in 2018, Reclamation was now permitted to use federal funding on this project to implement. In 2018, Reclamation received $750,000, 2019, $2 million, 2020, 1.5, and then this past year, 1.5. None of these funds, well, 2018, these funds do not need to be paid back. This was to help, we spent it to help establish the process of how we will implement the pumping plants and get to the goal of reserve power. In 2019, these funds were used to purchase the 5 remaining radial gates. We are still working with that contract. The 5 gates have been fabricated and delivered. The hoists have been fabricated and delivered. The contractor we are working with is now refabricating the control panels, and hopefully those could be delivered this winter. In 2020, again, we used some of these funds to continue to move through the process and the support of implementing these projects. So that being said, oops, wrong one. That being said, we can use reclamation funds for design support, and that means design review and acceptance and the hydraulic physical model. So most of these projects, if not all, will need a physical model. And so reclamation can use our funds to pay for that model. And then also we are allowed to use it for construction oversight, environmental compliance, cultural resource compliance, easement acquisition, and project management. So but reclamation must conduct these tasks. We cannot just give the funds to the district, or we cannot give the funds to the landowners. That's not how we can utilize the funds. So we can use our funds to pay our staff to do the environmental compliance, to do the cultural resource compliance. There's a lot of small tasks that have to be done in order to get through designs. It's a lot of things that people aren't aware of. So reclamation is supporting the district and everybody else in taking on some of these tasks and funding it internally, and they do not have to be paid back. These funds do not have to be paid back for this support. But you must follow the design and construction process laid out by reclamation in order for us to take title to the system. That being said, the intent is for each system to receive project power. Regardless of who owns title to the system, there is an avenue for project power for these systems. The most streamlined and efficient means of getting the project power is to follow the process that we have set forth. And I'll show you, a handout should have been submitted to all of you that has a process flow chart, and I will briefly explain a few key points of that. But with the design process, and if you are looking at your process flow chart, some of the key things you want to be aware of is be highly vigilant on when to start things. Like cultural, environmental, realty, wildlife, those cannot begin until 30% have been decided and completed, because they need to know where everything is going. They need to know the layout on the land. They need to know where the disturbance is going to be in order for them to do their process. Some of the processes like environmental may not take as long as cultural or realty. That's why we need everybody's starting at 30 when we actually have that information that could help move us forward. Know who to contact in the district, in reclamation, in ecology, so that you can receive the same information. Sometimes there's some misinformation out there, but we're doing our best to try and give you the same information, the correct information. If you have all parties involved, and then that will help solve some of the miscommunication problems. Do the tasks in the right order, don't miss a step. And that is because sometimes you can't go back. Or if you do go back, it's going to cost a lot of time and money. And so just try to do them in the right order. Each process is a different duration. The power process itself is a very long process. So that needs to be started as soon as they can. Whereas some other things just don't take as long. And so that's why all of these tasks out there need to be thought about in the beginning, so you know when to start them. Be aware of deliverables and requirements in order to complete a step. Don't move on to the next step and ensure you've met the previous requirements, because sometimes we just can't go back, or it's just going to cost a lot of money and we have to start over. And be sure you have the correct information. The flow chart, let's see, it's right here. I don't know if you have that in front of you, but the boxes in orange, ECBID has the lead in that task. Those in green is Ecology has the lead, because not all of the systems have grant money right now. Some do, some don't, and therefore Ecology has their own process in dealing with the grants. In yellow is WDFW, and blue is reclamation. So as you see right up in here, cultural, environmental, easement, all of this starts at the 30% when we're reviewing the formal package. And then if you notice, start power here as soon as possible, because then it leads to two separate processes. The example I used is grant PUD, and then also we have their BPA process. both of these have to go together in order for that reserve power to come to fruition at the same time as the design and construction are completed, because this could take upwards of 4 years. And so designs take approximately 2 years. So that's why you kind of want to get things started at the same time. And as you walk through this process, you can ask me questions. It's pretty self-explanatory and straightforward, but 30, 60, 90% designs, review, acceptance. So you walk through all of this, and when you get to the end, there's some requirements you must have in order to begin construction. So this helps lay it out so you know to try to keep track of everything that has to be accomplished. And this is only step one in the title acceptance process. There are two other steps for that. So that's what it is, a lot of moving parts, but we're all doing our best to keep it flowing and trying to work things all together between all the partners and make sure that we are moving this forward in the most efficient way possible. That's all.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. We're going to go ahead and take a brief moment to switch it over to Jed, who's here with us in the room.
So here, I'd like to go ahead and get started. And as Christina's bringing the slides up, I think my role is just to link what's been shared already. I appreciate Melissa speaking about the history. There's a lot of foundational work behind developing the Odessa Groundwater Replacement Program. And I appreciate also Jennifer explaining some of the process steps that are involved. The partnership among these entities has helped to advance the program. And that includes some significant construction. Primarily first for canal conveyance by the canal widening, the second sets of siphons, and the canal radial gates. Those are the primary things that helped with canal conveyance and able to get added flow capacity to serve additional acres. Since those were undertaken, we also started working on lateral delivery systems. This slide here is just a cover page of a presentation we typically give to tour participants. It's a photo of the work done by the district to pour the top floor of the 47.5 system. You can keep going if you don't mind, please. And we've done our best to provide consistent messaging that goes with the project. Keep going, please. Again, laying out the history and collaboration and investment that goes with the project are key elements of implementing successfully. Next page, please. We've shared the various features that have been added or improved on the project and developed, go ahead. We've developed conceptual projects or delivery systems to be served. We have a process to meet with these individual system landowners and help them walk through the steps as well. The last page is just some specifics that we share on the 47.5 system. I think just the momentum of that first large scale district system becoming operational bodes well for landowners, setting the pattern that it's achievable. The other link that I'd like to provide, and Harold speaks about this as a pivot point, to be able to help the program take advantage of federal funding opportunities. And I think that's the focal point of today's meeting And the irrigation district does our part in that as well, as we've reached out to take part in the PL 566 program. So I thank you.
Well, that gets you up to speed on the history, what's happened to date and all the work that's going on in the background, and gives you a brief glimpse into what the timelines will be moving forward into the future. And that's what we're here to talk about right now, the future, the federal part of this program, to bring federal USDA, NRCS funding and programs to the OGWRP. And we have a panel of presenters here with us today. And it's my distinct pleasure to introduce the next speaker. Roylene comes at night. Roylene and I have worked together for many years. She was my boss for all the way up to my retirement. And I must say that was a very rewarding experience all the years I had with her. And also she has a distinction of being, I think, the longest standing state conservationist in the United States for NRCS. So she brings a lot of knowledge and experience to the program and is well respected in NRCS. So we're extremely fortunate to have her on our team. So with no further, Roylene, it's yours.
So good morning, everybody. I got to tell you, we're pretty excited about being a part of this, being a part of actually being here. We've been teleworking for 1.5 years now, so it's nice to see people. So just a little bit of our background. Like Harold said, I'm Roylene Comes at Night. I'm the state conservationist for the Natural Resource Conservation Service. So you guys are getting a lot thrown at you. You heard from the Bureau of Rec. They're a whole different other federal agency. So I need to make that distinction because she just went over their rules. Well, guess what? USDA, we have some other rules that are a little bit different. Okay. So please, please, please ask. I want to introduce my team that I brought with me. I've tried really hard to make sure that they're all here so that you're aware of who they are, that they're here for you. So if you've got to sit down with us at our kitchen table, that kind of stuff to get some more details, please do, because it gets really, really complicated. So I think the next slide. So, oh, which one?
It's the arrow. Let's see, should be the arrow.
So first I want to introduce my team. I've got Larry Johnson here, my state engineer. He's been working with East District on a program that we'll talk about called the PL 556, and we're going to tell you a little bit more about that program. I've got Keith Griswold is my assistant for programs, and he's the person that knows the ins and outs and everything on our programs, and we're going to talk to you about some other programs. One thing you're going to see with USDA, what's going to get complicated, is we have multiple programs that do multiple different things. Okay. I wish we could say, here's one. Well, we're going to come to you and we're going to say, here's 4 or here's 5. So if one doesn't fit you, there might be another one that fits better. Okay. So we're going to try to go through that. Austin Shiro at the end here is the area conservationist for this area. He's in charge of all the local staffing and the local things that go on in this area. So he's the one where if we need more help in a certain field office, he's the one that's going to be able to say, hey, boss, I need more help. We'll make sure we get help there. Nick Vera back here in the room is our programs person, our partners person in charge of that program. I brought him along because I wanted him to hear who you've got engaged. And if he comes across some more partners, we want to bring them to the table too. And Nate, where's Nate? Oh, over here, my public affairs specialist. Nate is new to the agency, so I wanted him to come to really, truly meet you guys and hear from you guys personally, because he's the one that puts all of this stuff, but he's the one that I think can help get the message out even more of what we're doing in this partnership. Because again, this can be quite big. me
Oh,
see.
right
Oop.
here, right here. Is that not working? I'm sorry. Try that again.
Okay, here we go. So we're going to talk to you about some new programs. We're going to talk to you again about the big watershed program, which is a really, really exciting. PL 556 is really exciting for us because we have done little to none in Washington State. I've worked in Montana, Arizona, and Oklahoma. PL 556 was huge in those states. When I was in Oklahoma, the same position that Austin had, I had one county alone that had 63 flood control structures in one county that used this program. So we've got some things for you. The Regional Conservation Partnership Program is a big program from Washington State. We're going to talk to you and show you that already Washington State has with partnerships, has tapped into this program, and we have about 58% of the state covered by this program already. We have a strength in Washington State that a lot of states don't have. Again, I've worked in 5 already. I got to tell you, partners are big and strong here in Washington State. I love the fact that Washington talks about it and can make it happen. So we're going to talk about, oops, well, that was my fingers. There we go. Our Environmental Quality Incentive Program. We're going to talk to you because that is a program that's specific to you as a landowner and a producer, where these might take a little bit, but you can still walk in our door today and take advantage of this program. And we're going to talk about, well, that's why we're going to give you some timelines, because you can walk in our door and take advantage of that program right now today. Okay. Oops, I skipped. I already did staff introductions. So some new programs that we're excited about that are coming to Washington. We just got our allocation literally yesterday for our matching money with the Bureau of Rec for a program called Water Smart. First time ever in Washington State that we get to do this together with the Bureau of Rec. And you can, Big Ben and North Central team, that's going to be Grant and Kittitas and Okanagan, took advantage of this. Partners got together. They put in a joint application for Bureau of Rec and for NRCS, and they got awarded at the national level. So exciting, exciting. We're going to bring about $1.5 million to the table in that program. Again, another program we could talk about and think about down the line. The PL 556, I'm going to leave that to Larry. Larry's going to talk a little bit more about that. I do believe this is one of those 4 that are working on a preliminary investigation for funding that goes to headquarters. Headquarters make sure it fits, because the one thing we have to be careful is we're not stepping on other agency jurisdictions and their toes. We don't want to step on the Army Corps and all those things, but we got to make sure it fits us. And so we do. I know you guys are one of the 4 that are applying for that watershed program. We have not had a lot of that, so that's exciting time. You're going to hear things about urban conservation. And the reason I'm showing you this is there's areas like this, like Moses Lake, that might actually fit that criteria for that new program. Brand new program we're going to kick out this year is really focusing on the urban interface with agriculture. How can we get that to fit? How does that work? You're going to hear a lot more from our agency. Actually, federal public comment is open right now on what climate farming is. There's going to be new incentives for those that want to look at climate type practices. We have 29 practices we're going to focus on that's going to give a high priority and provide more incentive for us to reduce the carbon footprint. And then we're going to talk about another program called the EQIPS Conservation Incentive Contracts. We've had people enter into our Conservation Stewardship Program, CSP. It's an annual payment program, and it's not really fit a lot of people because it wants the whole entire operation. And if you're large, that's a lot, and that's a lot to have to cover. But this program is going to be a program that's kind of in that transition, and it'll be parcel by parcel. So this will be a better program, we think, for people who want to try an incentive. Say you want to try a new practice that you've never tried before, but you're not sure how much it's going to cost you or what it's going to do. This is a program that's going to help you, and we're going to provide a federal incentive to try it out. Okay. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Larry, and he's going to go into the details of the PL 556 and the work he's been doing with Jed and them, and then we'll go into some of the other programs.
Larry, if you could really speak into the mic.
Okay, will do.
Thank you.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Larry Johnson. I'm the State Conservation Engineer with NRCS and the Small Watershed Program Manager. And so what I'm going to do today is just try to give you a broad brush overview of what the Small Watershed Program is, how it works, and then kind of give you a status report of where we're at with the East Columbia Basin Irrigation District with their application. So hopefully that's the message you hear, and that's the target I'll hit today. So just an overview of the program. It really is a program that's designed to set up cooperation between the federal government and the local government, state, local, and also irrigation districts. And we work together to address needs. We also provide, through that process and cooperation, we provide both technical and financial assistance. And a project sponsor is required in order for us to participate in the program with the locals. So basically, a sponsor is a unit of government, could be the state, tribe, irrigation district, or all qualified sponsors. We work together with the sponsor to complete the watershed project. And just so, you know, for this program alone, we don't work directly with private landowners. And if it is needed, the project sponsor would do that on behalf of the watershed project. There are 4 basic steps to kind of moving through the program. The first one is to conduct a preliminary investigation feasibility study. And basically what that does is it really identifies whether or not there's any major barriers or anything related to that proposed project that may not be eligible for the program. And so that's step 1. Step 2 is once that work has been completed and the project appears to be eligible for the program, then there would be an application for federal assistance from a project sponsor. Step 3 would be moving into the watershed planning and planning process, which also doubles as our NEPA process, which is basically complying with all the environmental protection requirements that might be out there. And then once the watershed plan is completed and approved, then you go into watershed plan implementation. And that's where you actually request funding to do the project work. So I just wanted to kind of talk about timeline here and how long each step takes. Preliminary investigation feasibility study report will take around 6 to 9 months. Application for federal assistance will take up to 6 months. Watershed planning can take up to 2 to 4 years. I want to kind of break that out here in just a minute and talk about why that takes so long. And implementation is where you really get into installing the projects. So there's really 2 things I want to point out here is we provide the funding for the preliminary investigation feasibility study. So that's kind of work that we would do normally to pay for the work, to see if the project is eligible for the small watershed program. And so once we get to the point where the watershed plan is approved, then the funding request would be a second funding request for the actual dollars to construct the project. And that happens down here at the watershed plan implementation piece. So there's really 2 phases of funding. One is to do the watershed planning. The second one is to install the project. So I want to break this one out just a little bit further into some more detail here and why there's such a large time frame on that. Basically, we would enter into an agreement with the project sponsor, and that, you know, just pulling the agreement together and all the work that we're expecting to be done takes about 3 months. We would also contract for a plan development. So more than likely, the most expeditious way to get a watershed plan completed is for us to pass money to the project sponsor to procure that work. So that's probably how I'd be looking at getting this work completed on this project as well as we kind of move forward. Then the watershed NEPA, the watershed plan also doubles as our environmental document, roughly 15 months for that work to be completed. And then watershed plan approval is really where it gets kind of difficult to estimate how much time it would take to go through that process. Basically, 3 months to 2 years, really depends on the cost of the project. This particular one, which we'll talk about here in a minute, is above the $5 million and would require congressional approval. And so it would go to the Senate and House Ag Appropriates Committee for approval. And that's where the local support becomes really important to get the funds dedicated to fund the watershed project. So that's really the one piece here that we don't have a lot of control over. Any projects that are over 5 million, which this particular one would be, requires congressional approval. So I think the local senators and congressionals are going to need to be aware of that and to really provide that strong support to the federal delegation so that we can get some funding tied to it. Okay, application status report. So we have received an application for federal assistance from the East Columbia Basin Irrigation District. We received that in May of 2021, so fairly recently. They requested assistance. They didn't want to wait for our funding to fund the preliminary investigation feasibility study. They opted to fund that themselves and to get ahead of the game, to try to, basically get as far ahead as they can to get funding, at least to get the watershed plan started and finished. So they're trying to fast track things as much as they can. Today, the study is just about completed. And just to kind of back up here a little bit, we know there's already been a lot of work completed by the Bureau and others in the state, a lot of studies, a lot of work, a lot of analysis. Our goal is not to duplicate all that effort and work. Our goal is to really try to piggyback on all that work that's been done through our watershed planning process. The one thing that I don't have any control over are the steps that we have to go through. But yet, I think with all the work that's already been done, those steps should be a lot easier to navigate. I heard that the Bureau had taken around 8 years to get through their EIS process. I don't envision that for a watershed planning effort. I would envision around 2 years. So with all the work that's already been done, it really should be a fairly expedited process. So right now, just so you know, we are at step 1. We are at the preliminary investigation feasibility study stage. We still have 3 more steps to get through, actually 2 to get through to get to the point where we start project implementation. So just kind of looking ahead, just to set the stage here for when I would anticipate construction could potentially start. And when I say construction, that would also include design. But basically, if we were to get the report, the investigation report completed, say November 1, I'm estimating that just based on the timelines we have here, that the soonest that work could start, this is where we'd have a completed watershed plan and a request for financial assistance could be made from our national office to fund that work. The soonest that we could start would be May 1st of 2024. Now, thinking about the watershed plan itself, it encompasses the entire area and all the water user districts that are within the area. And I know that they're all at different stages of implementation. That's not a problem with our watershed plan. Basically, as they get to the point where they're ready to hit the ground running, we can request those funds for design and implementation when those needs come up. So the watershed plan, once it's finalized, it really sets the stage for requesting those funds when you folks are ready, when the water user districts are ready to fund these projects. So I know some are, one's already been done. I think there's another one underway, and some are probably years out before moving forward through implementation of the pumping plants and the delivery lines to the farm fields. So that's just a quick overview of where we're at, and be happy to answer any questions if you have any. So I'll just pause here for a minute and see if anybody has any questions. Yes. So by doing that, and I'm not sure I'm going to. I didn't know I was gonna have to do that.
Let me help you
Okay.
with this.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, I think the question is, we know that right now there are 9 lateral lines, each one in different phases. 47.5 has been completed, 22.1 is approaching 30 to 60%. Each one's at a different phase. PL 566 will look at each one of those projects individually. We know that it'll take time for all those to come on. So we look at those at an individual basis, right, Larry? Each one, he called them irrigation districts, they're not, they're irrigation lateral lines. So each lateral line is a project unto itself, knowing that the first one up, 22.1, could fall into that 2024 timeline because it's so far along. The 79 group may come on about the same time or later. 86.4 is about ready to go. But some of the other ones, 11.2, some that haven't even started yet, that's where Larry's talking about when they come up and get staged, we would submit funding requests for engineering design if it hadn't been started on those individual projects and basically lead them through it. So each one is an individual project, taking multiple years to get. So we wouldn't put in, if the whole project cost 400 million bucks, let's say, to do every lateral, in a perfect world, you would all be ready to go. We'd write one plan, all the engineering's done, would request 300 million or whatever it was right up front. That isn't the case. The case is that we'll look at each one of those individually and request the funding necessary to plan or design and get those ready to go. Does that answer your question?
So just for clarification, we're going to have one approved watershed plan that will have all the laterals in it. So we're not going to do the watershed plan for each individual lateral. It's going to cover all of the laterals that are out there within the irrigation district. So with that said, once those irrigation lateral entities are ready to move forward with construction, then we can request funding underneath the approved watershed plan. So we're not going to have to go through the watershed planning process for each individual lateral. Yeah, I hope that helps. Yeah. Yes. So in some cases, I know that the irrigation lateral, are they called water user groups?
Laterals.
They're just, okay. So the laterals, irrigation lateral entities, if they're already in the process design, and so they're in the process of designing the lateral and the pumping plant. And let's say, for example, we get to the point where we have an approved watershed plan and they're ready for construction at that point in time. We just request financial assistance to fund the work to get on the ground. So if they haven't started design yet, then what we can do is request funding for design and for construction for those laterals that aren't at that stage yet. So really the program is fairly flexible as far as trying to work with where you're at in the process and moving the project forward. No.
Add one thing in there, Larry.
Yes.
About construction. If you were to start construction before this is approved, you got some issues.
Yep. So we can't pay for work that's already been done. So if for example, the watershed plan is approved and work begins before the watershed plan is approved, we're not going to be able to cover those expenses for work that's already completed before the watershed plan is approved. So that basically that's kind of the line in the sand on what we can pay for. So with my example of, say, for example, you had a consultant designing the lateral and that work happened before the watershed plan was approved, we can't go back and pay for that work that's already been done.
So just to clarify, so for example, right now, the 22.1 is, I believe at the point in the chart where the OR has approved its 30% design and is moving forward. And the state has funded in appropriations, 21 million, which brings the cost down a little bit, but it's a $70 million bill. So if they began utilizing their 21 million of the state appropriation, and then we're now ready. So say, for example, this is a biennium budget. It was appropriated starting July, so our shot clock is running. So we would then, that appropriation would have to be rolled forward if we couldn't start building until 2024. Could they begin preliminary, like pouring the pad or purchasing the pumps and pipes to put it in inventory, or some of that with their 21 million in anticipation that then you would cover some of the rest. And then on that appropriation in anticipation, we were understanding that 25 million was the point where you had to go to congressional for the construction dollars, that 5 million was the planning money. So you'll have to clarify that.
Okay.
But if they got an additional 25 million from the federal government, that would bring the price point down to something that the growers, the producers could afford. Without it, then they're kind of in a predicament, right?
Right.
So how do we build certainty in this timeline today, going forward? How do we build certainty? They have 21 million. How do we build certainty at the federal level? And this is the other piece of it as a person that is advocating for this project. It seems like the state is more committed with state dollars for a federal project than the federal. And so how do we get commensurate federal commitment to make it match what the state is willing to do?
So I'll address the watershed planning, 5 million. It is a $5 million threshold. So if the project cost is above that, then it has to go through the congressional approval.
And that's a 2-year deal. So we would have to start now and asking for something that isn't already planned.
Yes. So and that's the part I'm not really familiar with as far as, you know, the lead time that it would take for you to get that to our federal congressionals and kind of, you know, push through. From the standpoint of the funding piece, that would be something I can't really say for sure what can be done and what can't be done. Like, for example, if materials are being procured for the project and haven't been installed yet, there could be some flexibility there. I would have to check into that and see if that is something that we could indeed allow, as far as, you know, the project's not actually completed. You're just buying the materials, knowing that, you know, let's say in May of 2024, we're going to be ready for construction. And so if that were the case, if those materials are already in hand, there's a value assumed with those, but they haven't been installed on the ground. There might be some flexibility there, but I would have to check.
You have to can't do a portion of the state money upfront and then have the government continue on. For example, you know, 2022 in the fall will be the first opportunity that any of these, and I don't know if they'll be ready for that or not. Let's assume they are. Drill down. 2022, they could dig the sump and start pouring the pad because they're ready. Let's say that's the case. And so 2022, they pour the pad, and then the following season, they come in and they set the pumps and start laying the pipe. That would be 2023. At what point can, you know, at what point can they say we need the federal support now?
Right. Once, and I guess the commitment of federal funding happens at the point in time where our state, through Royalene, receives the funding for the project. Once we receive that funding and we sign an agreement with the project sponsor, which would be the East Columbia Irrigation District, then we are ready to fund the project. And we can't do anything any sooner than, I mean, that's the format that we work under. So once that's signed, then the funding's available. And if you are at a certain point in construction, we're probably able to fund the project from that point forward, but not backwards. So does that help?
Yeah, so they could technically like
Potentially, yes. And I'd want to make sure that I think we take the project and move forward with the work that hasn't been completed with probably not a whole lot of problem.
And so the same way the 79, they have 16 million to spend. Same, and they're moving forward, but they're not as far along in the design.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. Well, I can tell you that the current farm bill has $150 million per year. And there's a lot of carryover from funds that haven't been committed yet. So, and with the new farm bill that's currently being worked on, I would assume there's going to be an additional amount or an increased amount. And there's been some talk about the infrastructure bill also that's currently navigating its way through Congress, could also yield some additional funding toward the small watershed program. So at this point in time, there is funding available. The sooner we get a watershed plan approved, the better off we'll be as far as funding assurance. And so, the whole country is interested in this program. It has a renewed interest because of the funding that's now going into it. So there's no time like now to get things moving. It depends on the project purpose, and I think it's around 75% is what we would be looking at as far as the federal cost share rates. So 25% would need to come from the sponsor, and it cannot be other federal funds. There are some in-kinds that are allowable, so that those are some of the conversations we'd have with the project sponsor. Yeah. Yes. Okay. I'll be around afterwards too. If you have more questions, just please follow up, and I'd be happy to answer any question you have.
How many years in addition to 2024?
So when the watershed plan is approved, basically Congress says, hey, we're approving this project for funding. It's just a matter of having those funds available on an annual appropriation basis from the administration.
So we could extend out.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Most likely
Yeah.
this program is going to be extended in the next farm bill.
Yeah.
So now that it's becoming national allocation.
Hit the base to digest. Yeah, I'm sorry, I have to keep moving this forward. We've got a lot of information to cover, but I think we heard the key points in this. Number one, we have a path forward. The program's eligible. Gives us a bit of a understanding of timelines, how much flexibility we have in the program. It can pay up to 75% of the construction costs. It can pay up to 100% of the engineering costs on new projects. Those are very key points to this. So as we learn more, what we don't know right now is when they're going to approve the next round of applications for approval for the watershed, right?
So when I inquired at national headquarters, what they did tell me
Keith.
though is they're going to do a quarterly approval of funds rather than before it was a 1-year time. It was like, you better have your
Push it.
application and you better have your stuff.
I got a lot of slides. Hit the key points and hit it quick.
They won't do these on a quarterly basis. So I did get that from the person in charge of the program.
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Keith Griswold. I'm the Assistant State Con for Programs. I'm going to give you some general overviews. There's going to be a lot of slides here. It will be available on the website for you to be able to take a look at, but I'm going to give you an overview of the programs. So Larry talked about the PL 566 program, and that's a big watershed program. I'm using this as an example. Imagine the Columbia River system. That's a PL 566 watershed project where we're talking a large project area. It's an example. It's not literal. When we go to the RCPP program, the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, that's a smaller size project. It's still big in nature, but it's in smaller size. So it might be the Snake River system, which is part of the Columbia system. And then when I talk about the EQIP program, that narrows it down even smaller. That's going to be your creek that's in the Snake River. So every program that we talk about kind of narrows it down to where the work can be done. PL 566 does big project stuff. RCPP does medium project stuff, laterals, infrastructure builds. The EQIP program, it does work on your farm. It's not you and all of your neighbors, it's you, where we can work on hooking up your decommissioning your wells, hooking up your pipelines to your pivots, putting those new pivots on the ground, converting, if you have any surface irrigation, to sprinkler irrigation. All right, so I'm going to talk about a medium project area, which is the RCPP program. I'm going to try and not use the acronym and that we typically have go out quite often. RCPP is the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. So what's its purpose? Congress designed it so that you guys or any group could get together and match money and bring money to bear with the federal government dollars, your tax dollars, working together with other dollars, whether it be state, local. It can be an NGO, a non-government organization, somebody that's willing to put money to your project. They got to bring it forward. It's a project that you put together a package, an application package, and you submit it to the federal government. You compete nationwide. Your project has to be of value or better than somebody else's because Congress only appropriated limited funds to it. So to give you an example of what we're looking at through the 2018 Farm Bill, that when we say it's the new Farm Bill, it's now 3 years old. It had $50 million in RCPP renewals and $300 million annually in projects that could be awarded. There's two fund pools that are there. There's the state or multi-state or the critical conservation areas. I'll talk about the critical conservation areas here in just a second. 70% of the funding through an RCPP project area has to go to financial assistance for projects on the ground. And then the other 30% is for technical. That is technical assistance from NRCS because we don't get an appropriation directly for just all RCPP projects. It has to be an awarded project for us to get funds, for us to fund our staff to be able to work on it. But also the project sponsor can get technical assistance funds to be able to help them install and foster the project to get it moved forward. So I talked a little bit earlier about the critical conservation areas. These are the ones that have been established. We are in the West Coast there on the Columbia system. And that is our Western Waters critical conservation area. So you're allowed to apply for two different types of RCPP funding. There are 5 features within the program of work that can be done: land management or land improvement practices. So that could be work on the ground. That could be laterals that are installed, head gates, the medium project stuff that we're talking about. There's easement types that are available. One, if you guys have heard of our ACEP ALE or ACEP WRE program, those are easements where we purchase the development right and keep it in agriculture or convert it back to a wetland if it was a previous wetland that had been destroyed or manipulated and it wasn't functioning as a wetland. And these are voluntary programs. So it's not something that the government comes in and says, you're going to restore this wetland. You get to make the choice whether you want to restore it back or not. Land rental programs. So in a way, it's a lot like the CRP program, where we're paying you to keep it out of cropland production, or paying you to maybe put a riparian forest buffer in there, and we cover the foregone income that you lost in that. And then lastly, public works or watershed projects. And as I stated before, they're medium-sized projects. It's not the PL 566 where it's big, grandiose things. It's medium-sized type projects. With all of our Farm Bill programs, though, the Congress has established eligibility requirements and limitations of how much is going to be put in there. So there is a AGI, adjusted gross income. This is a USDA eligibility requirement that it looks that if you make more than you or your entity that you are or part of makes more than $900,000 in a 3-year running average, then you might not be eligible for these programs. So it's really important that you go talk with FSA and you file your forms in order to determine whether you're eligible for either the RCPP program or the EQIP program. And then it talks about there are, through the RCPP program, there are waivers that are available if you qualify for certain stuff. Now, once again, Congress set up some of these rules. My agency did not. I did not. I just got to lay it all out to you of how Congress said these are how we want the programs delivered. There are 4 pillars to the RCPP program in order to make it a successful project. Impact. What is the impact to the land? What we're talking here of decreasing the aquifer drawdown and bringing you back or bringing you on to surface water is a huge impact. So it'd be eligible for there. Partner contribution. We got the Grant Conservation District here that's working. Those are the partners. Any other partners that you can bring on with the state, NGOs, cities, irrigation districts. The quantity of partners that you bring to the RCPP program actually affects its score. Innovation, what is new and something that you're bringing that is new to the system. If you were to put in a project that said, we're going to just moldboard plow in order to do our cropping systems, that is not innovation. But no-till, precision farming, GIS farming, all those are innovative products that this program looks at. And then lastly, the partnership and management. In the RCPP program, the partner is the lead, and they're required to do a lot of things in order to get there. And so having a strong partner that has experience delivering programs to the area is highly important. And as Roylene had stated, Washington is exceptional in partnerships and working with our partners. Just look at what we got here at the table of everybody that's there. I've worked in 4 states. I haven't always seen this. So there are opportunities there. Eligible lead partners, irrigation districts, farmers co-ops, Indian tribes, state, local units, governments, and the whole explanation is there. I'm keeping moving because we got a little behind. But what it basically requires is that the lead partner get together and work with other partners within the area to develop a project that meets the requirements of the program and submit it to NRCS nationally when the program comes open. So as you can see here, this is just kind of a flow chart of what the RCPP program looks at. We look at what the lead partner can do. Leads it, develops the proposal. They bring a contribution, whether it's money or in-kind services, project innovation, and develops the proposal. NRCS comes in here. We help with developing contracts, award technical assistance, responsible for management of contracts, reviews the proposals, and moves the process forward along with the partner. So here's where we're at with the RCPP program. We have a yearly announcement. We're expecting it to come open here in the next 3 months, that there will be an RCPP announcement available. As Harold stated earlier, they applied last year. They were not awarded, but that doesn't mean anything. And here's the reason why I say that. There is a lot of competition for these RCPP projects. And we provided comment on how to improve the proposal, and they're working on getting that improvement put in so that when this thing opens up here in the next 3 months, they're able to put in the application and see where we fund out. There is an APF. I'm trying to remember the acronym for APF. Yeah. Anyways, it is another source of RCPP funding. Sorry about that. But it's available for different types of projects that are larger of scale. But that is typically not what these type of projects would go after.
Guys, to your watershed or say your lateral area is not accepted, you would receive that fine. So what it does is we basically put that money aside, and that is your money for 5 years. It stays there, okay? So it's not like you're applying every year, you're competing every year. That money, once it's approved, goes over here, and it gets its own funding code, just for you for the 5 years. That's the advantage of our over all the other programs, is because of the fact that you've now got that money targeted for those 5 years. You could do a renewal. We've been successful in one in the state for a 6th year. Well, they got
Another 5. Yeah.
They got another 5 years. So we do have one of the RCPPs, actually the near Spokane, that now is going on. We'll have 11 years of guaranteed funding for their one watershed area or smaller area.
Yeah. And so, it's localized to the area that is submitted. So as Roylene stated, that money's set aside and it's only for the applicants within that area. So it doesn't get shifted out where somebody could say, oh, well, we need to move it down here 3 miles. If it wasn't within the proposal, it's not eligible. It's focused, localized money for that area. Maybe.
Oh, click back up. There you go.
There we go. All right. So wanted to give you guys some information of where you can find information for the RCPP program. On my staff is Laura Williams. She's the local contact. She's the RCPP coordinator. So that's who you'd want to talk with. Once again, though, I advise you to get together and either work with the conservation district, local government, to find out who can be the project lead and who can put the proposal together. Then here's a list of all the information of projects, a congressional report, our fact sheet, and interactive mapping and success stories.
So one thing that we did for this program before it totally took us over is we were proactive, and we were one of the, I believe we were the first state in the country to have a full-time program manager just for this program. Plus we have a full-time engineer and we have full-time planners. So we dedicated 8. I asked for 11. I got 8. I got 8 people full-time to just this program, so that you will have that direct resource. Because a lot of our other planners are doing the 5 other or 10 other programs too, but these people are specific to this program only. Okay, so there's also that resource to be available where you'll have or the staff available to help with this.
All right. Any questions on RCPP? Yes, ma'am.
So on the clarification on the RCPP that we applied for, that was a group effort by many of us in the room and help of Harold to do that work. And we put together that very robust application and appreciate everything that everybody did on that in a short timeline. And the state timeline didn't mesh particularly well for our partnership share.
Mhm.
And now you have that money sitting in the account.
Correct.
You know, as the partnership share as we reapply. So how is that going to look in terms of our potential for getting that additional support for the growers to use that money for?
Sure, not a problem. That was one of the hangups with the application last year, is that it had to be dedicated funding. We had a commitment letter, but it wasn't a guaranteed funding. Now that we have guaranteed funding from the state in this applicant, it's going to rate higher.
Most of the
Yeah.
I'm just gonna tell you that. We actually had, I think it's one of the districts had to fight actually 3 times and then they finally got it. But majority of them, again, just learning the language and the logo of the lingo of this program, by getting those comments back from the national team of what they looked at when they ranked it, that stuff, and being able to incorporate those, I think it'll go a long way. It'll go a long way.
Yes, sir. It's available to be applied for a waiver. It has not been waived. So here's the problem with a waiver. It's a process, like all good government programs. It's a process. I'm trying to be abundantly clear. What it requires is that you put in the AGI, your AGI information, and it would come back from FSA or from the IRS and say you're ineligible because you exceed 900,000. And after that is done, then we can request a waiver, because they require that it's found that it exceeds.
So once you get to a stage that the RCPP has been approved and we find things that get that RCPP based on our policy that doesn't quite fit like AGI, then all we gotta do, or I should say I gotta do, is I have to submit the information to the chief of NRCS, and he has the authority to waive it. He's the one that can sign off on the waiver. Actually, Keith's already got a template letter that we just sent to him and get his signature. So once he signs out of it, and that is the one nice thing about RCPP, in the actual Farm Bill law, it says that the chief has the authority to waive agency policy, which is really cool because we don't have a lot of programs that do that. So RCPP gives us that flexibility because it wants to see innovation. That's another good thing too. If there's something new we want to try, something, I don't know, something that's never been done before, and we want to do a new practice, this is something that we can definitely consider in that program too. And it'll help us as an agency to learn that maybe that's something we need to adopt in all of our programs. So that's one nice thing about RCPP also. So we're ready to roll. We've already put our documents together, so we're just waiting to see if you guys get funded, but we've already done our homework. We're ready to go.
There are limitations for participants. I'm thinking of trust.
So there are payment limitations according to a tax ID number and a social security number. And I'm going to get into that here real quick through the EQIP program, but it pulls across through the RCPP. Any other questions for RCPP? Yes, sir, in the back. Okay, so yes, and here's how. We will definitely have to work with Washington Water Resources and look at you're going to abandon this well for this area that's supplying water here, but you're moving it down here to this property. And we would have to work with Water Resources because you don't have 2 of 5 years experience of irrigation on this place, but we're going to abandon the well and remove the irrigation from this location.
And believe it or not, we were the first state to get a waiver on that 3 5-year irrigation district.
So we were excited to know we were the first ones to actually push that envelope. So again, we've got that ready to go.
It requires coordination, but it can be done. We have done it. Yes, sir, in the back. So with RCPP, it's a little bit different because it's a partnership-led program. So let's say an irrigation district or a lateral already has their designs. They can use that as in-kind work that they've already paid for when they bring it to the table. And once that RCPP project is approved, we then already have the designs. We then just need to go through the contracting process, which is a little bit like our EQIP contracting process. So it could take 3 to 6 months to get it through there and work through the cultural resources processes that we have. But if your designs already meet our standards and specs, and that would be Larry's department, and he's back there talking, he's not paying attention to me waving at him. As long as the designs meet our specs, that speeds it up. If we have to design it, that could slow it down. So it could be a year out.
We have seen some of our contracts go in, like you said, that first year.
Yeah.
As soon as the contract is all signed off on, quickly, we have had some that have done that. But again, it depends on how far you are in the process.
It depends what you or your entity or your partners bring to the table. The more you bring to the table, the faster it can be.
So for example, because of a lot of the work that's already been done, the cultural resources, the environmental assessments, the NEPA, the threatened endangered species, you guys have a lot of that stuff already done. Again, that all can be taken as credit towards an RCPP saying those concerns. That means we're not paying for it, and that's a good thing. Whatever you can show that NRCS doesn't have to or doesn't have to pay for, that will go towards your more points of partnership match.
All right, I'm going to jump on to EQIP. I'm going to assume the majority of you have heard of the Environmental Quality Incentives Program or the EQIP program. If you haven't, you need to let me know now because I'm going to buzz through this thing in order to kind of get us back on track. All right. EQIP program is basically our flagship program. And as I stated earlier, it's work that is done on your property, on land that you control, operate, or maintain. It's for the site-specific stuff that gets done on the ground. We're solving a resource concerns. It just depends on what you got out there because it's statewide and it's for all resource concerns that are there. But specifically here, we're looking at irrigation water savings, aquifer recharge, and soil health and other factors that are there. We're trying to solve a problem that exists on the field. Payment rates are developed in a contract where we state how much we're going to pay per unit. It may or it may not cover the entire cost. So when you get into an EQIP contract or you're looking at it, you need to know if I'm installing pipeline or if I'm digging a well and the EQIP contract's only paying for $30 per foot on your well and it costs you $65, you're going to eat the $35 or you're going to have to come up with the other $35 in order to pay for the entire project. It doesn't cover everything. Water management entities with the new farm bill were brought into play where they too could apply for EQIP. The problem for it is, as a water management entity, you're only allowed up to $900,000 in EQIP funding. Tell me what lateral costs less than $900,000. So at least it's new. Let's see with what we can do with the next new farm bill to maybe increase that amount. But we're getting there because, like I said, water management entities were not applicable to apply for the program. I'm clicking. I'm clicking. Ooh.
Click too far.
All right. Our Payment limitations for this farm bill are $450,000 per entity and or individuals. So I'm going to use this as an example. Austin, Roylene, and I, we have the family farm. Roylene, of course, because she is my boss, makes more money than I do, and she has a larger percentage of our family farm corporation or trust. She gets 50%, or she has 50% ownership. Austin, he's a better man than me. He's got 30%, and I'm the youngest kid in the family. So of course I got less, I get shorted. I'm the young one. I only get 20%. As the payments go for the EQIP program, let's just say it's $100,000 payment. I'm trying to do easy math for me. $50,000 of that payment went to her Social Security for tracking. That goes to this $450,000. Even though the money went to the entity, it's tracked by her Social Security and our tax ID for the entity. So Roylene has a $50,000 payment that's been made to her $450. Austin gets $30,000 to his $450, and I got $20,000 to my $450. But the entity got $100,000 put towards its $450. So you got to watch how much each person within your entity, your trust, their percentage rate goes to, and then what other EQIP contracts they may have had, or CSP. No, EQIP is all by itself this year. I have to get that straight. The $450,000 is only for EQIP, that if they had singular EQIP contracts, that you don't exceed that $450,000 payment limitation for this farm bill. With each new farm bill, there can be a different payment limitation, and that may or may not be attached to it. So I talked real quick about the entity also, and then informal joint ventures, water management entities can do up to $900,000 in their contract. Payment limitation waivers, we can look at it for the adjusted gross income and also payment limitation waivers, and go to the chief for his waiver for it. Water management entities have to be of these business types in order to be eligible for the EQIP program. And this is how FSA sets up your business type in there for a water management entity, or for your trust, or for your family farm. So this just explains what types are eligible. AGI requirements, these types are not exempt from AGI. Corporations, charities, churches, and LLCs. And then we have this great, pretty matrix that says, if you're this, what do you have to have? What are your AGI? What are your payment limitations? All of this is on this sheet, or you can contact me directly. Also, it's available online if you want to be able to see it. And this talks about the different entities, what they are. I'm just running through this. All right. So Farm Service Agency is the keeper of USDA eligibility for all programs. So you need to be able to work with them. We work with them. That we're in a joint service center usually. That's who you need to go see, because in order to apply for our programs, you have to file an AD 1026, which is your HEL, highly erodible lands, or wetland conversion paperwork. Farm and tract eligibility, that sets up your farms and your tract numbers that FSA works with. So I'm farm 1302, and I've got tract 1833, tract 1891, and so on, that it goes through. And then lastly, your adjusted gross income, which is a 941 form with FSA that they submit to the IRS. If one of these three comes back and says, no, you're not eligible, then you are not eligible for USDA programs until you can get that resolved with the FSA. For the EQIP program, we had our program announcement. It was announced in August for fiscal year 22 sign up. We had an application deadline of October 7th. We had 600 18 applicants this year. And we require FSA eligibility to be completed for those applicants by November 18th. To give you an idea of what we can do for irrigation, these are the typical common practices that are available. We have a lot of practices that we fund nationwide through the EQIP program, but these are basically the irrigation ones that are out there. So we talked about well decommissioning is available, pipelines, drip systems, sprinkler, pumping pumps, structures for water controller like head gates, or large structures where your water typically comes in. These are the type of fund pools that we have for the EQIP program. Statewide energy, that could also be something that you guys could be interested in, because if you're converting from using a standard horsepower to a variable speed drive, those are energy savings. We can help you with changing out the pump so that you use your variable speed drive instead of a standard 40 horsepower. As an example, we have irrigation efficiency. We've got CNMP for dairies or livestock operators if you're working with your livestock and your manure application. We've got CNMP implementation, and then we have local working groups, and we have some national fund pools. As Roylene stated earlier, we just found out here last week, and it gets announced today, there are 2 Water Smart projects that were awarded here in the state where we're working with irrigation districts, BOR, and we're going to be able to put $1.9 million on the ground between these 2 projects this year. It's a 5-year project, so we get $1.9 million for each year of those 5 years in order to improve the irrigation systems within these project areas.
So you don't panic when you look at those many fund pools. Our system is set up where you put up one application, not all those fund pool applications. So you don't panic and say, which ones do I qualify for? Don't worry about that. You get one application, our system will tell us which ones you qualify for. You won't have to worry about all those. But we just wanted to show you the diversity of areas that we try to cover. We have National Air Quality Program in this state, which covers this area. We also have Sagebrush Initiative and things like that are national. The other thing, what we have been doing is traditionally we've been about $26 million a year on the ground for EQIP alone, just by itself, not Rcpp, not all the other programs, just this one program by itself. We have an opportunity to go back and ask for additional funds. As long as you meet that deadline of eligibility, the eligibility deadline, then we can say, well, so if we got 600 and something applications and they all come out and they rank very well, we could ask for enough funding to cover a majority of those applications. We traditionally try to do about 400 applications, if not more a year.
If we have more applications than the money we have, it shows a need to our headquarters and to Congress that the demand is there, and that usually relates to additional funds being submitted to the state. So for just this last year, yes, sir, let me finish the slide and then I'll jump to you. For this last fiscal year, we funded 37 irrigation contracts worth $5.4 million out of our 26 million that we had. Yes, sir. Austin, I might require your assistance here of where those projects were because I do not remember them.
So there were 2 applications submitted. You guys hear me okay? Okay. 2 applications submitted. One was in Okanagan. It was a small irrigation district.
Whitestone?
I think that's right.
Whitestone Reclamation Irrigation District.
And then there was also one in Kitsap County that was submitted, again, working with the conservation district there to implement on-farm. So we were looking at on-farm irrigation improvements, a little bit of sub-lateral stuff. So that was the main thing. It's NRCS design, but the thing that I told my local district conservation, work with your district, work with the irrigation, and absolutely help build it. So that's that partnership. That's what.
All right, last call. Yes, sir. Questions on EQIP?
Will that EQIP program be the right program to replace steel pipeline with PVC?
Steel pipeline. You're talking concrete or steel pipeline?
Let me speak to that.
Okay. Sure, if you want to.
I'm going to jump in and take that question. Every practice has a life expectancy as identified by NRCS. So those steel pipelines are low, old, inefficient, they're leaking and whatever, we can justify replacement.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to wrap this. Go ahead. I'm going to take one more question here.
Individual, is that per year or
Per farm bill. New farm bill is supposed to come out in 2023.
And then you get you're re-upped again, and then you're ready for another 450 or whatever the eligibility. possibly is.
Potentially, I'm just going to say this. Under the 2008 farm bill, when they went from 2008 to 2012, they said any payments made from the 2008 farm bill into the 2012 counted to your 12 payment limitation. With this last one that they did, they kept them totally separate. If you had an old EQIP contract that was done, say in 2013, and you were still going on, it did not affect your 2019 EQIP contract. They kept them separate. That's Congress's prerogative, thank you, of how they make laws. So I cannot guarantee that it will be different or the same next year.
And even though you see EQIP can go up to 10 years, I'm going to disappoint them who had an EQIP contract for my own personal family. Don't go there because one thing our program does not do, it does not cover inflation. And we came in with steel prices and fencing went like this, and we could not adjust our contract to adjust with that inflation. So even though it said on paper that they were going to pay something at the cent, they ended up paying like 30%. So we tried to not do more than 5 years because of that issue, even though QUIP has a 10-year option. We were one of them that decided to go 10 years, and by the 8th and 9th and 10th year, QUIP hadn't gone that far because inflation. So just to give you a little caution on that program, because we've gotten, in fact, producers actually cancel their contracts when they get that long.
Okay, boy, that was a lot of information. And I'm going to try and bring it back and run you forward again. PL 566 under our program here is what we're shooting for, is to pay for the pumping plants and the lateral lines out to your farms. That's the way that's going to work. The RCPP application that we're applying pays for on-farm work. That will be your booster pumps, your main lines, possible looking at sprinkler reconfiguration, high pressure, low pressure. We can also look at some of the overflow issues, some of the return flow issues. All those things are on the table that will be worked out within the RCPP. So 566, the big pipeline, the pumping plants. RCPP, your on-farm infrastructure, getting you hooked up to the new system. EQIP will come into play as well, but not so much under this project. And the other thing to keep in mind, we can't build on-farm stuff to nowhere. We've got to link this up with your lateral lines and when they get to your farm. So we're trying to schedule this out in a way that, like for RCPP this go around, we're looking at the 86.4, we're looking at the 79 systems, we're looking at the 22.1 and possibly the 11. Those are really quite a ways along right now. So the RCPP will tie this first round to those systems because we think that water will reach you in time to that 5-year timeline on RCPP. Remember, we can put in for the application, get the money in hand, and that stays in that pot for you for 5 years. So as those lateral lines get out to you, then you can apply for the RCPP and have that lateral line and your on-farm systems connect at the same time, and you're ready to go. Equip can come into play, but again, that's when water's available. So, and you also heard that RCPP can be renewed and re-upped and ask for additional funds as those pots run dry. So we keep that in mind as well. We're going to sync this stuff up for you and make it work. The timelines you've heard are important, but I've worked with the government long enough to know they're very conservative. They are conservative. You have done a tremendous amount of work already. NEPA's in place. All the environmental work's been done. We intend to tear off that existing work and shorten that timeline down. We want you off those aquifers as soon as possible. So although I respect the timelines they've said, I also know that they're conservative. And we will push. We will push to get this in as quickly as possible.
To add to, Representative Guy and I sat down with the chief of NRCS and he's waiting for an invite to come out and see the project.
What's my next?
So he told me last
Pull
week,
it up.
again, remind them to send me a letter on his calendar. So the chief of NRCS, my big boss in charge of all of these, he would like to see what the project's about and he's willing to get behind it.
Yeah, we don't have time to tell you all the background work that's gone, but believe me, it's considerable. And I'll just say we've greased the slide all the way up to the top. And I think we're in a really good position. So I'm going to close this out. We've gone past time and your patience, and we had FSA lined up and queued up to talk as well. That presentation is recorded. You can get online and see that. It's also in your packet. So we apologize for that, but just for the sake of time, I think you should just know that you have to tie in with those people at some point in time. So next steps, just things to consider as we move forward. We know it's extremely important for each lateral to form their own working group. We've seen the effectiveness of that with the 79 group, the 22-1, the 86-4, they've created their own working group so we can have a point of contact and work with those laterals individually. That's critical. We need to communicate regularly with your engineering firms as they come online, whether it's going to be NRCS in the future or the 22-1 working with your groups. It was really good. The other day I was with the 22-1 and that working group and some of the questions. They can do a lot of your on-farm engineering work, but you need to work with them and let your thoughts be known. So that's a team working to get your hookup points right and know what you're thinking. I think that's critical, working closely with your engineers. You need to work with me or the Conservation District with your on-farm planning. I can get all the paperwork and stuff necessary for working with FSA and NRCS. I can do some preliminary look at your pipelines and your pumping plants and your configuration, get all your maps together and ready to go. And also run some preliminary power issues related to your wells coming offline and what your new power requirements will be. PUD needs that sooner than later. If we wait clear to the end on some of these end systems and they don't have that information, it could slow things down as far as reconfiguring their substations. So that is critical to this whole process as well. You need to work with FSA to get your farm entities in order. We heard that from Keith. We heard that from others. Get your paperwork going sooner than later with them, and they'll be very helpful to make that happen. Without that in place, you could stall the whole process. Work with East Columbia Basin Irrigation District to understand how you're going to work with these new water systems, how that water is going to come to you, the timing, all those different issues, especially for those of you that have only been used to going out when you need water, pushing the button and your well kicks in and the water's there. That will not be your future. You're going to have to coordinate with your irrigation district when you order water and how that all happens. There's been a tremendous amount of talk about But what if one of my systems goes down on my farm? What if I have to do maintenance? How's the system going to react to that? Believe me, it's taken care of. I worked with the engineers or talked to the engineers. If you got to shut a system down to change a wheel, work on a gearbox and whatever, the system has enough flexibility to absorb that. Where we don't have the flexibility is if we have catastrophic failure, and that's not your worry. Catastrophic failure means that your main pumping plant goes down. That's the irrigation districts and the Bureau's issue. There's nothing you can do about that on your farm. You don't have power, you don't have water, that's somebody else's issue. That does not mean you don't need to coordinate with your irrigation district because these systems come on and off on your farm. You're going to have to learn how to do that. I heard from the engineering firm the other day that there could be as little as a 6-hour turnaround time. If something goes down, you call your water master, they can adjust the system within those timelines. So those types of things need to be worked out with your irrigation district. Visit our site. Subscribe to our newsletter because we will keep you up to speed on a day-to-day, week-to-week, as new information comes on board that's going to affect how you're going to work in this system. That's the place you're going to go to get that information. We will keep that up and current for you. And that's also how you get your questions into us about anything. And if I don't have the answer, or this district or whatever, and Roy Lee needs to answer that, or Larry, we'll get to them and we'll get that answer back and out to you. And we'll do that in very short order. So you've got a tremendous team working for you. There's no doubt about it. You've seen it up and down the line. Everybody wants to get this project on the ground in as short order as possible. And I think we're sitting in a tremendous position to make that happen. Will we meet all of your timelines? No. Are we asking you to stall the process? No. Keep moving forward. We will do our best to link up with you and make this work to where you get the most benefit out of the federal programs, out of the state money, and out of the local assistance we can provide through the conservation district. And I do want to reach out to our conservation district people. You've got a couple of them in here today. John Preston's here, Richard Lights is here. They basically gave us a green light to work with you and make this happen. They're footing the bill on that. And they're your local entity that can make projects like this happen and coordinate and facilitate. So we need to recognize the conservation district and the work they're doing for you as well. So we tried to cram a whole lot into a very short period of time here, but I think we hit the key points. We are sitting in an excellent position to make this happen with a PL 566 program. Roylene and I have talked, although she can't promise you, she's going to make it happen. I have a tremendous amount of confidence in her. And Larry and the other people here, Larry's got a huge amount of experience in 566. We've got a great team working for you here. So I really don't have time to answer a lot of other questions. You can always reach me offline. My card is in each one of your packets. Call me anytime. I'll work with you. I want to work with you on your individual farms as well. So thank you so much for being with us today. I hope you learned something here today and feel a little more comfortable with the timelines and things that are happening. We don't have all the answers, but we're getting close. So thank you so much for your time today.